I do love an older man. Like an age gap is definitely my preference. And I think that part has really been exacerbated by having a lot of baby boy fans. Baby boy, I can't believe you. You know how long it took me to get those dishes just right? This is what it feels like to be at the top of the game.
Yeah.
And I am getting a little emotional just because it is a big deal for me.
Hey, I'm Ariel Demure.
Hi, I'm Maddie Collins. Hey guys, I'm Maya Wolf.
Hi, I'm Little Puck.
I'm Bree Mills, and you're listening to the Adult Time Podcast. All right, Lexi Luna, welcome to the Adult Time Podcast.
Thank you so much for having me.
You are our first guest, I believe, who has come on the podcast barefoot.
Yes.
So everybody,
I know my audience.
There you go. Everybody can thank us later.
But also, I low-key forgot shoes. I have heels for later, but it didn't feel right.
You arrived on the set with the heels,
yes.
And then upon seeing our comfy couch set up,
I was like, heels might be a little.
It would be a little formal. Yeah, no,
formal.
But
You're right. A little formal
for this very casual conversation.
In my very casual Adult Time brand ambassador jacket.
Those are nice jackets.
Oh yeah, they're so shiny and
they are
special.
I feel like now for those who want one of these jackets now, which the goal is that everybody should want one.
Of course,
they're very exclusive,
yes.
Limited edition. Only myself and the brand ambassadors have them as of now, and we do look like a Glee club.
Yes. And I think that makes all of our hearts sing.
It does, because we're all kind of secretly like we would be a Glee club. We're the Glee club of porn, the Adult Time team.
I agree.
Excellent. Well, we've got a lot of stuff to talk about today.
Yes.
But as always, with this new format, my team wants us to break the ice officially, as if we need to break the ice. But we have never broken the ice in this way.
That's true.
So we're going to play a game.
Let's talk about the reason why I have not yet been on this podcast. We were scheduled over the summer.
We were.
And then I had an incident with a cactus.
Yes, please tell everybody what happened, because you're right. Although I'm glad that, everything works out for a reason. Yes. I'm not glad that you fell into that cactus. But I am glad that you got to come once we had our new format. But please share what happened that morning, because it was not actually a laughing matter.
No, it was not. I was walking my dog and I'm opening the gate to get out. I step off the path and there's a 6-inch drop because there isn't enough mulch where the ground and for how high the concrete is. And I lose my footing and I have these 2 giant agave plants with their huge spiky tendrils, and I step into one and then fall, so it pushes in and then rips. And I had to go to the doctor to get it removed. I had to be on antibiotics. And I was like, this is going to ruin the podcast.
And I got the saddest little text that was like, Bree, I have fallen into a cactus. I am currently at urgent care. Yes. I don't know if I can sit. I'm going to try. And
I was like, give me an hour.
It's like, no, girl, we will have time.
Yeah.
Please take care of, but everything mended.
Yes, we're all good.
We're all good.
No organic matter inside the butt cheek.
But it is true, that's one thing, living in California or living in any desert climate, I'm not from here, so I was not used to how dangerous cactuses are. Yeah, no, it's true. Yeah, cacti. I'm sorry.
The teacher in me can't let you do it.
Yeah. Those cacti. Thank you, Lexi. So first question, speaking of, I want to play a game called Desert Island with you.
Okay.
Okay. So I'm going to ask you 3 questions. The first question is, okay, so let's assume you have to go to a deserted island.
Okay.
Okay. And you can only bring one fellow porn star on this island with you for an eternity.
Eternity.
Because you will both survive. Okay. This island has a lot of resources. It doesn't have any other people, and there's no means of escape or ever being rescued or visited. But you will eat well. There's lots of water. You will survive. So if you could bring only one fellow colleague to the island, who would that be?
I was just, as you said that, thinking, would it be a guy or a girl? And that's why my head was like, oh, because that's a choice too.
Mm-hmm.
I think I would pick a female because I value the friendship more than I value the sex.
Mm-hmm.
But there could also be sex.
Yeah, you get the best of both worlds,
Yeah.
as they say, in lesbian dynamics, in same-sex dynamics. Yeah.
And my best girlfriend in the industry who like gets me and we were really close is Katie Jane. So I would bring Katie Jane.
Nice.
She's just really a great friend.
Yeah.
And that is hard to find these days. And sometimes, especially in an industry like this where it's, you know, a lot of people and you don't necessarily have a community because we're not going to work every day in an office and seeing each other. It's not that type of environment. So yeah, that would be Katie.
So shout out to Katie Jane.
Yeah, love you.
So Katie Jane and you are on this island. Okay, let's imagine that. Like I said, there's no rescuing, there's no visitors, but one day a parcel arrives from the sky.
Ooh.
Okay, and it contains a sex toy.
Oh, okay.
What would that sex toy be?
It's the magic wand vibrator, like for both of us.
Yeah.
Hands down. We can share one, but it would be great if you could drop two.
Now, can you explain to everybody, because the only response that I ever hear when asked a question about sex toys is the magic wand, is the
Yes.
Hitachi. So
Yes.
for those who are living under a rock, what is this literal magical device, and why should you either have it for yourself or get it for your partner?
Okay, so it was marketed as a muscle massager, like an intense spot, kind of like what we have now with those little guns that like massage you, except it was just the vibration. But to be fair, I think that might have all been in marketing and not so much like the people who, if you know, you know. But it's one of those things where it's too intense if you are not ready for it. But the more that you experience your sexuality and the more that you like experiment with it, and it only really has 2 levels, high and higher. And so for a beginner, it is not the way to start.
No.
And I think that might be where people get too freaked out by it. But it is basically just a giant vibrator. All it does is vibrate. I don't think it's meant to be inserted, but I guess you could. There's not that much insertable potential. So,
Yeah.
and it's pretty wide. So I don't know.
Yeah, it would be an impressive insertion.
I think that would be definitely somebody had a size fetish.
Yes, yeah, 100%.
And it just vibrates. It vibrates really strong and very consistently, and it doesn't have those stupid vibration patterns that come with all the other toys that are so unnecessary. If you're watching this, companies that make those, stop it. Just make it vibrate more, harder. Don't need to go like.
I don't think I've ever heard anybody that actually uses
Never.
those functions. Yeah.
Like, is this kind of like buy one get one type of situation where like you make me feel like I'm getting something extra, but really it's just like you have too many of these and you're trying to get rid of them.
Or I mean, it always happens when you're doing like website development or any kind of like, you know, product development where there's like one feature people actually want, and then you spend all your time making all these bells and whistles that those are the additional vibrator functions.
Yes.
Yeah. It's
Totally
true.
unnecessary.
It's
And
true.
not strong enough of a vibration either, because maybe the pattern could be something if it was like the same intensity as like level 1 of the Hitachi or magic wand.
But as you said, level 1 of the Hitachi is already like it's
True. It's not for
intense.
beginners.
No. So okay, this is maybe a pro tip that you could give, right? Like, so for someone who's going to use a Hitachi, it is an intimidating thing, and you can hurt yourself.
And they're huge.
And they're
like
big,
the size
yeah.
of them. Most of them plug into the wall, the good
Yeah.
ones.
Yeah.
The vibrator, the ones that are, like you can recharge are all right, but it just doesn't have the same power as a motor plugged into the electricity.
So how do you like advise people to start with a Hitachi? Because
Over
if you
your
just
clothes.
go, over your
totally
clothes,
over your clothes. I even still like it. Like I like to wear panties and do it over my panties just because it's enough of like a muffling that it also kind of distributes it differently. And you know, a little bit of cotton makes a big difference.
Yeah, you need a bit of a shield.
Shield, yeah, that's a good way to say it.
Okay, so we've established you and Katie Jane with ideally 2 Hitachis
Ideally.
on a deserted island. All right, so my last question in this scenario is, you know, other than all of the resources that sustain you, if you could have one other item that you would use to entertain yourselves for those many, many, many years, what would you want to bring?
Like a Spotify subscription.
Yeah.
You know, because we totally have satellite.
Yeah. No other internet access but Spotify. Yeah.
We're both very musical. Like
Yeah.
she's DJ KJ, and she like plays music every time we get together, and she's pretty good at like coming up with the playlists and stuff. And I love music. I know lyrics to a lot of songs. Like learning lyrics is my thing. I don't know. You know, some people are really good at math. Lyrics is the gift I was blessed with. And so I know a lot of music, and I just enjoy it so much, all types of genres. So that's something that we would both find entertaining.
That's very, you know what, that would be a kind of a sweet island to
just two girls with
to
their
stumble
touches.
upon, and then their playlist. Yeah.
It's all very simple to please us.
Well, if anything, that sounds like a good scene idea. Maybe Spotify or Hitachi will sponsor us. Probably not. But in any case, that's amazing. All right. Lexi, you mentioned when you corrected me on my incorrect use of the plural of cactus that you were a school teacher before getting into porn. Can you give us, tell us the Lexi Luna origin story, please?
Yeah. So I was teaching kindergarten through 4th grade over a variety of years. And 5 years in, I had been to 5 different schools, and I'd, started 5 different times over again. And it's just like that. I never felt like really competent and like I was really moving forward. It felt like every year I was just like struggling to survive underneath all the work and the materials that needed to be made, all the manipulatives and things that like I didn't have help to do, and I didn't have time to do. And so I just started to look for something else. I wanted to maybe work with adults. I still liked the education piece, but teaching kids was not my jam anymore. And it was becoming more and more difficult. This was in like 2016 was my last year that I taught. So,
and had you gone through all of, I guess, the sort of traditional education in your training and everything?
Yes, I got my undergrad degree, and then I had qualifications to teach English language learners and special needs students as well. So I had a variety of types of students that I worked with, which comes with a variety of parents.
Yes. As a parent, I can understand. And so you had, I guess, had originally begun your kind of career thinking, working with kids was what you wanted to do, but after doing it for a number of years, you realized
and it wasn't necessarily even the kids. I think that ultimately became the thing that I like blamed it on. But it's always everything above what we can control, right? The districts and the people who are above you, and ultimately government funding, which we know is tied to performance very highly in this country. And so I just wanted to get out of the classroom, and I started looking and started building my resume. I started, doing professional development. I'm trying anything I can to make me more than just a classroom teacher, because when you get an elementary ed degree, that's pretty much it. Like, you're teaching elementary ed. There's no distinction between you and anybody else. That's why I went for the other certifications as well. And so when I got to the point where I was like, there's nothing for me in schools anymore, I started looking at maybe doing some kind of like training teachers, educational software situation. And I actually went through 7 interviews with a company, and then they denied me. They're like, we went with a local candidate. I'm like, you couldn't have told me that 4 interviews ago. And so, like, I had met the CEO. It was a sure thing, and then it just was not. And to me, now I look back on that, and I'm like, if I had gotten that job, I would never be here, and I would never get to do what I actually really love. And so during this time of teaching, I moved from Indiana to Florida, and I didn't have a community. I was in my 20s, making friends as an adult for the first time in a place where I didn't know anybody. And all of my co-teachers are well in their 50s and 60s. So there's a big age gap there. And so I started exploring fetish, and I learned that not too far from me was one of the world's best rope dungeons called, what was it called? Oh, it's been almost a decade. The Woodshed. And I started attending because, I was interested in the classes. I was still very interested in learning things, and like this was a whole new world that had just opened up to me. And I was like, wow, look at like the potential. So I started going to classes, and they started teaching about safe, sane, and consensual practices in kink play. And I was like, this sounds very nice. Like, this is very good education.
Had you up until, because I'm always interested in how people discover kink, right? And then discover that they have an interest in it. So for you, you had your kind of your coming up in your, into your 20s in Indiana, school teacher, very kind of conventional path. You moved to Florida, you're trying to find a fit. Then you find the Woodshed.
Yeah.
How was it that did you have it in mind? I've been harboring these interests. I want to try them out, or like what's the origin of your interest in fetish?
Yeah, I think I had always had like this like the thing that turns you on. And I didn't necessarily know that it was being tied up or being, participating in kink play of some kind. But there was nothing that was like say, oh, this is when I started becoming interested in kink. It was around the time that 50 Shades of Grey was popular. So there was a lot more conversation in general media also about this type of thing because it was very like, oh, 50 Shades, like what did they do what to her? And I was like, did they do what to her? And so I kind of just started doing some research, and through my research, I found this website, FetLife, which is the social media network that kind of connected me to the woodshed. And this was, well before we were really heavily into the Instagram times, all that kind of stuff. Like this was probably 2009-ish, 10, that I started to kind of like look for this type of thing. And then by the time I had fully, like in 2016, jumped fully into the adult side, I had already had lots of experiences because I had this interest and I found this little quiet community on the internet. And before everything got all crazy on the internet. And so we had these social hours where we would just get together and hang out and like talk as people in public places. It wasn't like this dungeon club that everybody thinks that it is. But then we would also go and have these experiences where people taught classes on how to safely put needles into somebody or how to safely flog somebody and how to not hit their organs and, the general safety things. Because actually kink in practice in group practice also is very safe. And there are dungeon masters who are watching for safety concerns, and they will stop your play if there is potential concern. Because it is a vulnerable time, and you may not, as the bottom or the top, be fully aware of what's happening when something can go wrong. And so just having those safeguards in place, like I felt very safe in this community.
Look, honey, the first step towards realizing a dream might be building a family. This is Grace, and she's gonna be able to take care of you no matter how sick you feel.
Where are you going?
I need to go shopping.
I already have everything prepared for you.
Hey, you can't drink that much caffeine. Honey, it's just not a good time. Okay, it's just not a good time.
Matthew, please.
It's just...
Matthew, just give me your hand. Give me your hand. Give it to me.
Get out of my way.
It's just fine.
Get out of my way.
What's her temperament like?
Worrying.
Not good.
I want you to make me a mother.
Let's take some time to think about it.
I want you to make me a mother.
What do you think?
I don't want you here anymore. I want you to make me a mother.
You're not supposed to be doing this. You know you're on bed rest.
I want you to make me a mother.
We're gonna have to make a decision in her perineum.
I want you to make me a mother.
There you go, Mama. You're doing such a good job.
I want you to make me a mother.
Laura, you are fully dilated, all right? It is time for you to start pushing.
I want you to make me a mother.
I know how sacred motherhood is. You're bringing a baby into this world. Isn't that just so special?
It's something that, like you said, people on the outside of it don't realize, but it is from all of my kind of experiences with the kink community, it is so heavily structured and thought out, and there's so much care throughout the whole process. Yeah,
and I think that's what really attracted me to it, because it was a transition, and it's not something that was new, that was something I'd ever experienced or talked about with any of my friends. Like, it was very much me finding it on my own for myself, which I think is why it's so close and dear to my heart, even though I don't fully participate in that now. Like, it is part of my origin story. And so I was dabbling and doing a little bit of modeling here and there. They would have photo nights where the photographers would get to come and practice like their setups and do different backdrops and shoot kink. But then the models would get a chance to practice their modeling and get some cool photos out of it. So it's kind of like a little trade. And so I posted some of these photos on FetLife, and that's how I got approached. There was a headhunter, shall we say?
Yes, a recruiter.
Who hit me up and was like, hey, I have this opportunity. Here's the potential, the whole like email that tells you what great things this could be for you. And I being 26, I was kind of like, okay, yeah. Let me talk to somebody on the phone because I'm not afraid to actually ask the questions that I have. And so I had that conversation and it went well. And this was in April that I was approached and school's over in May. And so I was like, just doing a little bit over the summer.
Yeah.
Like,
just test it out.
Just test it out.
Yeah.
And if it's not for me, like go back to teaching first grade. It's fine. And so that was at the end of May, I learned that my contract was not being renewed for school because I was the most junior teacher. And for some reason, the people who have just finished school and have the most recent pedagogy knowledge and have like just been in the classroom trying out these new strategies that we're learning in college are the ones they want to get rid of first. But it was a tenure situation. Like, you know, you've got 60-year-old teachers who have tenure that isn't offered anymore, but you have to honor it.
Yeah, you have to kind of grandfather it in. Yeah.
And so I was like, okay, maybe this is a sign that like, okay, this is what I'm doing. And so then I shot my first scene the first week of June. I went down to Fort Lauderdale, drove my car. Like I felt very like, if I don't like this, I get in my car and I go home. Like there is no, I think all the stigmas and the fears that some people might try to put in people's head about what the adult industry is just didn't really stick to me because I'm like, I can fully just turn my car around and drive 2 hours back north. Yeah. I'm good.
You had the one thing I think that's important about your experience is the fact that you had lived this whole life. Like you were, you know, you had a career, you had independence, you had, you know, you'd gone through a lot of that important life learning before you took the decision to
I was fully developed.
Yeah, you were. Your frontal cortex had fully developed. Yeah.
I made this decision out of zero duress.
Yes, yeah.
Both emotionally and chemically, you know, like our hormones go crazy and we're still not fully developed at 18 when we sometimes make this decision. And so for me, I think that was a lot of it because I do have a lot of anxiety. Well, I did. I worked a lot through my anxieties and having this career really helped with that because you know, the stress of life is very different when you don't do life the way that everybody else does. Like those were the things that stressed me out. Waking up at 6 a.m. and getting home when it was dark after 6 p.m. sometimes in Indiana because you're just, you have to do it. Like if you don't do the prep work for teaching, nobody's going to prep for you.
Yeah.
And that's the part that really is difficult because you have to have so many different pieces in your lesson plan that it's hard to make it all actually work in a time period that you have, which is the first sign that I should have seen that it's like, this isn't possible.
Well, and also just being at the mercy of whether your contract's going to get picked up or not, or not being able to kind of control the direction of your career.
Yeah.
And I know that for a lot of people in our industry, like the independence is actually the driving force because you can make your own schedule, but you can also make your own career a success or a failure depending on what you put into it.
Yeah, and I think that also comes with a little bit of wisdom and age is knowing to have foresight and to think the actions that I'm taking right now are building blocks of what Lexi is. What do I want to portray to the world? Do I want them to see me as, you know, a meek girl, or do I want them to see me as a strong woman? And both of those are fine. But you have to decide. You can't go back and forth and like, well, now I want to be this, and now I want to be this, and now I want to change my profile picture for the 70th time this year. You know, like branding, I think, is the thing that I really kind of started to figure out early. And that was the like piece that I'm like, okay, this is like now my wheels are turning in my head and I'm like seeing some future here.
So you get in your car, you drive down to Fort Lauderdale, knowing you could leave at any moment. And
feeling totally safe and comfortable.
And what was that first scene like?
The first scene was actually unexpected. Because I had a certain way to carry myself, I got asked to do a fetish scene for my first scene. So I did not actually have sex in my first scene, but I did in way too tall a heel for my teacher self. At that time, it was a pleaser, and I was like, what is this? I was wobbling like a baby lamb, and I was beating this man who voluntarily, happily was there, very consensual, but we were in Florida, and I was wearing full latex dress, like so sweaty, and we were just whipping somebody on this like platform, and he was in stocks, and it was a lot of fun, and it was very comfortable for me. Like I had talked to him prior because I had this training in the kink world, and I was like, hey, let's talk about do's and don'ts, you know? And before I ever really in the adult world had a consent conversation, I was bringing that to my bottom because that was what I had been trained in.
Yeah.
And so I'm glad I did because there were a couple of things that I was like, oh, okay, did not expect you to say that, but noted. And so that also just underscores the importance of these conversations, especially when you're talking fetish and kink and potential impact and that kind of stuff. So it just made me feel like, okay, yeah, like my previous life kind of helped prepare me for this moment. And I look back on that scene and I remember the time where I swung and wiped out. And I'm like, oh, thank you for editing that out. Because, you know, it's hard. It's easy to do when it's just me and that person. But then it's like this whole camera piece on the outskirts of my eye. And I was like, okay, gotta like make myself look not like I'm literally trying to hold every muscle in my body to not fall in these heels.
And that was the first time you'd ever been like recorded by a camera crew. Yeah. Which is a totally different experience.
Yeah. And you know, the camera guy's like up and down in these angles because he knows what looks great when you're talking about this like giantess style, or potentially like the woman is so in control and like in charge, that those low angles. But it freaked me out because I'm like, what do I look like in this angle? I've never seen myself from bottom up.
Yeah. It may not seem like it's the most flattering angle, but yeah.
And over time, I've learned that like they only ever make us look great. You know, it's never any cameraman's like purpose to try to make us look bad.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it's like not having any experience. I was like, oh, I hope this looks good, and you're not seeing up my nose, or you know, something silly like that. And so that scene was very difficult in just the dealing with the weather. And I remember having to like powder up to get the latex on. But then that powder quickly started dripping down my leg because it's sweaty.
Oh, yeah.
And latex,
yeah.
And it was real latex. It wasn't like lined or anything. Like it's legitimate latex straight to the body. And it looked great. Latex looks great.
Yeah, it's just hell to get on, but it does look good when it's on. Yeah.
And now every time Lauren wears it, I'm like, yeah, just yes. Like
you go, girl.
I get it. But like the stress, I know what this took, so I value it even more.
Yeah. And then so you did that first scene, and then you mentioned that early on you started to kind of zone in on the importance of branding and consistency. And I mean, I know for me, the first time we met, from like the offset, that was something that I took away from you, was like how strong you were behind who Lexi Luna is as a brand and your principles as a brand. And as an evil marketer, I really appreciate that. So I remember being like, whoa, you know, like you have a plan, you know what you're doing. So how did that, you know, how did that kind of, maybe explain a little bit about the Lexi Luna brand, and maybe what are some of the principles that you've developed to keep your brand so strong and consistent for your fans? Because I think it's really impressive.
Thank you. I always wanted to present the me that in my head I was already presenting to the world, because we always like romanticize how we act, and like, you know, it's so much easier to come up with something to say after you've read something, like in text. That's why texting is so great. You have time to come up with your response. It's not live like this right now.
Like this stressful environment.
Meanwhile, you're like,
I'm just fully, no, these
I'm
are
totally
our security
fine.
blankets. Yeah.
But the Lexi Luna brand is all just about elevation. Like, I want to elevate my fans. I want to give them a goal to aspire to, a way to treat me, like telling them exactly what I expect, because that's what I learned as a teacher. Setting expectations is key. Once you set the expectation, everybody knows it. And then when you break that expectation, then now I have a reason to reprimand you or to punish you or to, you know, whatever the case may be. To redirect you, I think, is the nicer way of saying that.
I like that, redirect.
The kink me is like,
that,
punish. Yeah. And so I just got to the point where I was like, okay, like I can make this brand really interesting and fun, and I can make it classy and exciting, and I can make it different. Because the thing that I noticed that nobody was doing was just like being them truly themselves. And I do feel like this brand amplifies the best parts of me and the parts that I really want to share with everybody, but still lets me be the shy me who, like, outside of this type of setting, I am really shy. But this stuff always so empowers me to be like that Lexi. Like, I'm not shy. I know exactly what I'm saying and what I'm doing, but that also goes back to the branding. My brand says and does a small number of things. And so it's easy to keep those in my back pocket and to always kind of be that. And ultimately, it really made me feel more comfortable because I knew exactly what was and wasn't going to happen. There was never a time where somebody could have me do something I wasn't interested in doing because my go-to response is, that's not my brand. And that's a comfortable thing. And that's easy to pull out and be like, that's not my brand, but here's something that is. And that's one thing that I've learned, is to like give an option for something that is possible when I say that like this is not something that's consistent with what I want to do.
And the brand attributes that you set for yourself in terms of like the types of scenes you shoot, the types of themes you like to, play in, et cetera, has that been pretty consistent since the beginning, or have you found that it has evolved over time as, your experience has evolved?
There was a little bit of evolution for coming from kink to becoming more mainstream, because I did perform in a lot of fetish for the first, I would say, 3 years of my career. Because I lived so close and most of the fetish is shot in Tampa and Orlando and all those different places in Florida, I was so easily triangulated. I mean, it's like an hour and a half to cross Florida. So it's really not that big of a deal. And so I met a lot of great people, and they taught me a lot about camera presence, because in fetish, pretty much what you're doing is talking to the camera for X amount of minutes. And so you have to have that ability to like bring these topics out, and you have to be able to follow the story. And that really came to light when I started working for more mainstream companies, not in fetish, where I would be cast as a stepmom, and then I would do the stepmom talk throughout the whole thing, and everybody was like, wow, you stayed in character so well. And I'm like, is that not what we're doing?
No, thank you. It is what we're doing.
And so just those little pieces, picking up on those little pieces, that also grew my brand much stronger in the eyes of producers and directors and all of those people, because they're like, okay, you see it right away that like there's something different about this performer. They're, if nothing else, staying in character was, I guess, a win at the time.
No, it is a win.
You're like, it's currently still a win.
It's just because I think sometimes people write off what we do when it comes to like narrative content as, oh, everybody fast forwards through the story. You just want to get to the sex. It's a hokey little dialogue bit, and then the real, reason people tune in is going to start. But when you're actually making content for fantasies and fetishes that are rooted in narrative, it is the story that's the fantasy. And so the second you break that character, the second you go from that diabolical stepmom in the 15-minute, story lead up to just Lexi Luna having sex in the scene, it's a real turnoff for the people that have committed to the story. And so, I in my career, I realized pretty early on that like if you can inspire your cast to keep in the mindset of their characters throughout the sex, it's like the ultimate payoff for people that are watching.
Yeah, tell me about it. We've had this experience recently, you and I.
We have. We'll talk about that. Oh boy. We sure will. But yeah, and it's something that I don't think people maybe paid as much attention to, but like you said, because it was part of your training, because it's such an important part of kink play. And for me, because I'm a lousy pornographer and I just like telling stories, it was a really important thing for me. It becomes a way to shine when, an easy way to shine in this business.
And I think that it's something that the fans, like I've noticed my fans when I have more dialogue-based stuff, or like they really, really fall into that role play. And that's what I want. I want to immerse them. That's the whole point. I want them to forget about all the troubles they have on social media aside from me when they're looking at my profile. I don't want to promote all the craziness that's happening in the world. Like, let's take a break from all that and like, let's immerse ourselves in some fantasy. And I do very openly tell my fans when they're like, oh, like talks about meeting me or something like that. I'm like, this is a fantasy. And, I very openly tell them when I don't feel like I can fulfill their fantasy. I'm like, that's not really my thing, but I hope you find somebody whose thing it is, because I don't want to do it disingenuously. I don't want to give you a fetish or kink play that I'm not 100% versed on, because it's not genuine. And so I think that my fans respect and value that. And then oftentimes they're like, well, what are you into? I was like, well, I love being a stepmom and I love being the woman in charge. And they're like, yeah, let's do that.
Yes, ma'am. Yes. Well, I know when we first started working together, I think you were the only performer that I can think of who sent a 1-page brand profile. And it was amazing. Because it spelled out as a producer all the stuff you like, the stuff we're going to do. It was like our own consent conversation prior to working together, and it was amazing. And I've since really used it as an example to share with others.
And you make it so easy because when I give you that and you read it and you're like, okay, that helps you plan the scenes that you would offer me.
Yeah.
And, it takes out that whole negotiating period before we book something where it's like, okay, well, how about this script? And then I read it and it's like, well, I don't like this. And, going through that just makes the whole process smoother.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
But all that stuff took time to get there. Like you got me at iteration, as you like to say, iteration 7.
Yeah.
As opposed to like when I was bringing literally all the wardrobe for every potential type of character I might play on set that day.
Yeah.
To now I'm like targeted and I'm like, no, this is the outfit.
So you've been in the industry for over 8 years.
Yeah,
now,
this
right?
is my 9th year.
So how would you say the whole MILF phenomenon has influenced your career?
I would like to say that without the MILF category, I wouldn't have a career because I was still coming in that early time where if you had fake boobs and curves, you were automatically a MILF regardless of your age.
Mm-hmm.
But I also was only 26 at the time, so I was still very baby-faced. And the collagen. Collagen in my face at 26. I was like, where have you gone? I look back on those photos and I'm like, look at you, chubby and happy.
Yeah,
Just so happy in the face.
Yeah.
And so because I was kind of like hot body, young face, which like is nobody's like mad about that. Mm-hmm. They couldn't put me in a category because I wasn't a teen, but I wasn't really a MILF yet. Like I wasn't facially fully developed into like the MILF role. And so I struggled for a long time to get bookings and to build my name and my career because I just didn't fit the mold.
Yeah. And this is an interesting thing to like, because I'm sure someone who's listening to this who isn't inside the industry and doesn't know the lingo. So people get very typecast in our industry based on assumed age, like the age of a character you would play, right? So when we say teen, we're referring to anything from 18 to say 24.
Yeah.
And then there's obviously MILF, which, as you mentioned, is kind of once you've had certain body enhancements and can appear to look like you might be somebody's stepmom or a woman of experience, but it's usually like 30, maybe late 20s into your 30s. And then, there's this age range in between that's referred to, I think, as the babe.
Yes.
The
now
babe
it's
era.
the babe category.
Now it's the babe category. But the babe category is oftentimes the most difficult category for female identifying performers to find themselves in because it's such a big niche, the sort of like younger character stuff, and then obviously the MILF phenomenon that oftentimes performers, when they're in that like 25 to 30 age range, can often really struggle to get work because they don't fit into one or the other.
Yeah.
And one of the things so anyway, folks, that's what happens. That's what we have to deal with. So please watch more women in their mid-20s who are not stepdaughters or stepmoms necessarily. But yeah, I've always sort of tried to think of what we could make that would like stimulate a babe phenomenon, because it's true that it can be really challenging years for people.
And the babe category is also kind of like the Instagram model category where they're not like 18 to 20. Like you can see from their body, their mannerisms, the way that they present themselves that they're not early 20s.
Yeah.
But they're not 30 plus.
No.
Especially with the filters. So and that's kind of that group of people. And I know that some of the people in that category definitely are like, I'm not a MILF. Yeah. Like they denounce MILF, which is up to each their own. I love the MILF category because my brand is all about being in charge and being the older woman and the more experienced. And, like that is what is very sexy to me. It's kind of become sexy to me through this branding that I've put myself through. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, no, I really like being able to go on set and make the boys fall in love with me. I really like being able to portray this emotional piece with my scene partner in front of the camera. Mm-hmm. And I don't feel like it's disingenuous to really fully connect with that person for that amount of time because the feelings are real. The chemicals that we're sharing are real. And so in that sense, it's very real. Like it doesn't have to be for a long time to actually be a legitimate thing.
Yeah.
And I think that's also one of the things is like, for me, everything was all or nothing in the past where it's like, well, if I start this workout program, how do I stop working out in the like how does this, if I don't work out every day, how do I possibly work out?
Yeah, it's got to be 100% or nothing.
Yeah, and that's something that you just don't really get taught. You just have to learn that through experience and what works for you, how you're gonna, how much of that like all or nothingness is really important, or how many times you can maybe flex a little bit. And that flexibility was definitely something I learned with the branding. It's like it can't always be the same role, but it can be a nuance of a woman in charge. There is a wide spectrum of that.
So you mentioned you love stepmom, the stepmom role play fantasy. So why do you think that? I know that that's something that obviously is. I mean, hey, it's kept us both in business.
Yeah, begrudgingly.
It's a very popular, very very popular fantasy. It's something that we shoot a lot of that content. I know there's a certain amount of fatigue sometimes within the community about like, oh gosh, another step scene. But why do you think it's so popular?
Oh, so I've thought about this a lot because I'm always trying to figure out like my audience and what makes them tick, and just generally try to give them the best I can. And so my thought for this was, at the beginning, I had a lot of people who were probably my age or a little bit older who were really into this stepmom thing. And I was like, this is an interesting age group. Why is this age group? And so I think back to my childhood, and I know that there were a lot of my friends who had divorced parents. And I think that like in the 90s and early aughts, divorce kind of became like a normal thing, and we integrated step parents and that kind of thing. And in those formative years, they had this stepmom or this step parent. And maybe that triggered something later in life where at that age they were, like same with teachers. Teachers always get looked up to, and like younger kids used to call me mom because when you're 7 and you're at school like that, they spend a lot more time with me.
Yeah.
But I thought like maybe there was something with this divorce phenomenon that happened at that time. And I don't really necessarily know like divorce rates for generations prior or anything like that. But that was kind of like if I had to pinpoint something, maybe that, because it gave them this opportunity to have a step parent and to have that like ideation of like, oh, this person is maybe attractive, but you don't know because you're like still forming those types of feelings. And so that's probably the best I can come up with. But I also want to say that maybe a little bit of it is because there was this MILF category, and then we turned it into this kind of bastardized concept of maybe actually stepmoms and not so much MILF, which is like older woman, like Mrs. Robinson style. Yeah. And so maybe the category, because we made it popular and then it turned into something else, but then we kept shooting it because, there's this cycle that tells us, oh, this is really popular. Oh, let's keep shooting it. Oh, hey, this is popular. Well, we kept shooting it. So of course it keeps being popular, and it's very cyclical. It feeds on itself. And when you present people with only a certain type of content, that's all they can consume.
Yes.
And so if you have not presented them with something else, they're going to keep consuming the thing and keep telling your data that, oh, this is a data point.
Yeah. Well, and wasn't like, I mean, I think MILF came from American Pie, right?
Yes.
That was, so it was like Mom, I Wanna Fuck or something So, I mean, I think it's like you said, it's, from my understanding, it just spurns from like, who is the first woman of authority who you remember, who you had feelings about, especially as like kind of like a young man. And, it probably was your friend's mom or some teacher or some, woman of kind of authority. And then over time it became that MILF like acronym. And then, how do you get away with that in role play? Well, you need to make sure nobody's actually related. So then it becomes the stepmom. And then, like I said, it
that's where we are now.
And that's where we are now. But yeah, I think for me, it's just sort of like like an ultimate kind of like adoration of women with experience.
Yes.
Because it's the first, dynamic you can remember.
And it's so strong because it is very maternal.
Yeah.
And I think that's why I'm very good at this role play, because having been a teacher, like I am nurturing. And just because I don't want to have kids of my own doesn't mean that I'm not still like hormonally nurturing.
Yeah.
And that might just come out for my dog Rocket, and I just maybe hold him like a baby.
No, but you've got but like it's also in the way you carry yourself too. Like it's having that confidence and the experience, and like that translates into just being like kind and, you know, looking out for other people. Again, like just somebody who you look up to.
Yeah.
Right. And so I think that, you know, that oftentimes people do develop feel like I remember when I was, let's just say I was 18, because people are born when they're 18 in the adult industry. But I was young, like, and I remember doing, because I did a lot of theater, and I did a play with, there was a woman who was cast in the play who was much older than me. I think she was like in her late 40s at the time. I was, again, let's say 18, but about that age. And I remember over the course, and she was very funny and a great actress. She wasn't necessarily the most conventionally attractive person, and I didn't find myself attracted to older people necessarily. But I remember by the end of that play, I was like in love with this
Worshiping
woman.
the ground she walked
Yeah, like
on,
and I had to really sit with myself and be like, why am I having feelings for Susan? Like, why am I like? But it was because I just really like looked up to her, and she had such confidence that it was sexy, you know. And I think that's the closest I can connect to that kind of that same feeling. But I think we all have that person that we were like, whether it's a woman or a man, whoever you're attracted to, who like you just remember really like looking up to and being
absolutely.
like, man,
No, it's definitely, for me, it's the well-dressed man who is like, and it's mostly just that, like, I know that guy's got his shit together. Like, that's the attractive part. It's like, I don't have to mother you. Like, you've got your stuff, and then I can be the classy lady that comes up with you.
Yes.
You know, and I do love an older man. Like, an age gap is definitely my preference. And I think that part has really been exacerbated by having a lot of baby boy fans. Because, and I love them as fans. I would never date them. It's just not my preference. And so, but I can give them a great role play. You know, and unfortunately, sometimes a great role play bleeds into their real life. And that's when I have to reassert my limits and be like, remember, this is fantasy.
Do you find that you often have to toe that line with fans? 'Cause I know that you're like, you have a close direct connection with your, you know, your OnlyFans subscribers and your loyal fans. And do you have to kind of help people remember this is ultimately entertainment?
Yeah, people fall in really deep and they want to, because I'm very welcoming and comforting, and I don't put people down and I don't degrade people. And I know some people are into that, but the ones who are into that and come to me, I'm like, hey, that's not really my thing, but I hope you find somebody whose thing it is. And I'm always very like, and sometimes I'll even recommend somebody. If I know one of my friends is really good at that fetish or that particular type of play, then I will recommend them. But what I don't ever want to do is like do something for the money for them, because they deserve better. They're the people who made Lexi Luna.
Yeah.
Without people watching, I don't exist.
Yeah.
And so I respect the fuck out of my fans, and I would never do anything to them to tarnish that relationship, because I feel like oftentimes in media, there are so many times where you're like, oh, they're not the person I thought they were.
Yeah, well, and to your point earlier, right? Like, by being straight up about what you like to do and staying consistent to it, you're also not diminishing, like, you know, who you are to them, right?
Yeah.
Like, if you flip-flop all the time on stuff where you're like, oh, I don't do this, but I'll do it for you.
Sure.
Then it also opens probably a lot of Pandora's boxes for people to ask more or expect more.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
So it's important.
Yeah, setting your limits in anything is important. And I think this is something that, honestly, I didn't really learn until my 30s. Setting expectations and limits for my personal life is just as important as setting them for my professional life.
You mentioned liking a well-dressed older man.
Yes.
That perhaps that was your ultimate fantasy.
Hi, I'm Lexi Luna, and this is my series With Love, Lexi. Today is all about me, the things that turn me on. I love a well-dressed man. I love making sure every single detail is perfect. The well-dressed man being my perfect visual. I love being able to capture that within the male talent choice that I've made, and being able to choose exactly the right person to make me feel sexy and to portray my sexiness onto him. very important. Being the ultimate fantasy, this is high stakes for me. I want it to be perfect. I love my fans. You guys are the reason that I exist. The reason that Lexi Luna gets to be so sexy on screen for you. And today, you get to watch me live out my ultimate dream, fantasy, desire, whatever you want to call it. This one's for me, for you. Sit back, relax, enjoy the sexiness, and I'll see you on the other side. This is my ultimate fantasy. Oh, it was my ultimate fantasy.
So this let's shift gears a little bit to some Adult Time stuff,
Yes.
because obviously you're Adult Time brand ambassador. You work a lot with us. We had the chance to work together on a project this year that was very personal to you.
Yes.
So maybe share with everybody a little bit about what that project was, and then we'll go behind the curtain into your experience creating that project.
Yes. Okay. So with Love Lexi, and by the way, just got the DVDs.
Nice.
I'm very excited. With Love Lexi, as Bree put it when we first talked about this, was a love letter to my fans. And so basically I have categories of fans, just like anybody else. And I put my fans into like 5 categories. And I decided that I really wanted to do something that I could never afford to do and build, this beautiful set and this moody lighting and all this attention to detail, because I think ultimately that's the one part of my brand that is very visible, is that I am very careful about what I put out there and what I don't put out there.
Mm-hmm.
And so that attention to detail piece is really important to me, but I don't know how to make that look good on camera. And so partnering with people who are actually super competent at the things that I'm not is the best thing, because I can only learn so much about cameras. Like, that's not my expertise. I'm a great performer. That's what I want to do. And so coming up with those things in my personal time and my personal life, trying to figure out like, okay, how am I going to shoot this? When am I going to shoot this? That part is very restrictive, and it makes me not do the content that I really want to do. And so when you came to me and offered this, and I was like, wow, okay, so if it was like limitless without like thinking of the personal restrictions of I don't know how to make this look good, what would I do? And I came up with 5 scenes, and 3 of them we chose for this series. And the one that culminated all of it was my ultimate fantasy, which was sexy ballroom dancing and just like being very intimate and very like present, and just like the looks and the little nuances, the hand touches and the eyes and the lips and the combing the hair, like all those little pieces that really tell a story. And telling it without words is almost even sexier, because your mind can go to anywhere it wants to. And so doing that project in particular that day, it was very nerve-wracking, but it was also very like, wow, like this is it.
Yeah.
Like I literally drew it out on a piece of paper, and now it's here in front of my eyes, and it's with fidelity, and it's the way that I want it, and it looks beautiful, and my fans are going to love it. And so that was just like very like, this is what it feels like to be at the top of the game.
Yeah.
And I am getting a little emotional just because it is a big deal for me. And Adult Time took me seriously. And that was like the first time where I really felt like a company had seen me.
Yeah.
Oh, you really bring this out.
Listen, I know I'm always making Lexi Luna cry. No, but okay. Well, I will. We need to get Adult Time branded tissues. This is the second straight interview where someone has started crying. But no, like just as a testament to that, like for me, how you described the idea of like I had this idea in my head, I sketched it out on paper, and then to see it come to life, like that is for me the absolute coolest part about what we get to do.
Yeah.
And that's the high I'm always chasing. It's what motivates me, and to be able to help others be able to experience that is like an even greater high. And what I loved about the With Love Lexi series was that it really was a love letter to your fans, but also to you, like to your brand. And we did the 3 episodes of that. And then what was really cool as well is, we collaborated on some story ideas for 2 of our existing series. So we had one for our series Modern Day Sins, and we had one for the Pure Taboo series. And in that case, it was you kind of giving us, hey, I've got the skeleton of an idea, our writing team taking it, formatting it, and then you starring in it, which, like you said, is you're the most comfortable, you want to focus the most, and having one of our teams direct it. And it was we just put out the Modern Day Sins release, which I believe is called A Little Encouragement, that came out, and it was the number 2 scene for scene satisfaction in the month that it came out.
I don't think I knew that.
Yeah, we just put out we just put out our sort of top 10 most satisfying scenes list, and it was number 2.
Oh, sweet.
So
okay.
hey,
I guess that's something we'll talk about at our next meeting.
Yeah, hey, there you go. Yes, exactly. But I think I bring this up because I know that one of your big learning curves this past year in working with Adult Time was you kind of realized that you love being able to give ideas, but that you recognize your place that you want to be is in front of the camera. So Can you walk us through a little bit about that journey? Because we always try to keep it flexible, right? Sure. We're not like, all right, you want to be a director, here you go. There's the slate.
Throwing you to the woods. Honestly, hindsight's 2020. And now I see it as like I was just uncomfortable enough to grow in that time. And it's almost like, was this Bree's plan all along? Because it really feels like you helped me grow so much as a performer in multiple ways. And that was just the start of that relationship. And, at the beginning, this was in January that we started planning this. I was just coming on as an ambassador. I had just kind of been like, this new world had been opened up to me. And I decided that I'm going to rein in performing elsewhere and just kind of focus on adult time and my own content and that kind of thing. So it was like a very transitional time for me too, because I'm like, okay, this is my 9th year. What do I do? What do I continue doing? Like, am I just going to keep doing the same thing? Because ultimately I know that's what the fans would be happy with that, but I need to find joy in this as well. And so that little bit of uncomfortableness, having that director role and a slight capacity and collaborator role, it was challenging because I had never been in that position. I'm making videos up to 15 minutes if it's a boy girl of my own content. So it's not really like I'm pretty much setting up cameras and, set and forget kind of thing, fix it and post. And so this was the first time where I was being asked questions like, which lens would you like to use? And I was like,
you're like,
which lens would we like to use?
It's okay. That's my response at all times as well. The wide one.
The one that makes me look pretty. Yeah. And same thing with, honestly, the wardrobe was the hardest part. I struggle to pick out people's wardrobe because I only know what I'm wearing, and I don't see the entire set as like, how do these clothes look against this white backdrop? Or maybe we shouldn't wear white without stripes because everything else is white. And just those types of things that I had never really stepped out of set and looked at set to be able to like even see and experience what that might look like. And so it was just it was like learning a lot of things, but I felt like, I've been doing this for 8 years. I've been watching crews do this for 8 years. I should be farther along, and I didn't want to like embarrass myself in front of crews, just like all the anxieties that we get when we're trying something new.
Yeah.
And I hadn't tried something new in 8 years because this was the new thing. Porn was the new thing. And then once you kind of feel like you've mastered that, then you're like, okay, now there's an expectation of me on set. People know me as very professional, and I don't want to tarnish that expectation and that like professionalism that I've built by not knowing what the hell I'm doing. And so it was just it was very challenging to feel competent. Yeah. And that ultimately I think is what kind of made me feel like this isn't for me.
Well, I can tell you in my own journey as a director, for the first number of years, I worked very closely with a small group of people. And it was the same people. And we all had roles to play, and we all had, strengths, and I fit in with that group. And there were certain things that I was really good in, and there were certain things that I knew were going to be handled by other teams. And when I stopped working with that group and I started working with new groups, there was one team that we had put together, and I was going to go in and teach them the recipe of, brands that I created and stuff like that. And I show up on set, and they're all looking at me with like big eyes and like with their notebooks. And I
ready
realized
to learn.
Like, I need to teach them everything. And I had this moment where I'm like, I do not think I actually know anything. Do I? And I had a real moment of self-doubt. But getting past that initial anxiety and, kind of being forced to have to do it, even though like inside you're dying.
You don't want to,
I realized in that moment that I did all those years that I had, watched the lighting guys set up the particular style of lighting, or like the way we did audio capture, or the way our camera was motivated by, this and this. I realized I knew it all. And as soon as I was forced to have to explain it on my own and not just rely on like, oh, he'll tell you about this or they'll tell you about that. That's when I acknowledged just how much knowledge I actually had retained. And kind of being forced to have to drive it made me so much of a better director ultimately, because I recognized like, it is in there. Yeah. Now that being said, I really like having a good team of people that know what they're doing. So I can say, make it look like this image, But yeah, sometimes you got to just kind of go through those uncomfortable moments to at least grow and learn about yourself. And the reason I bring up the modern day sins and the pure taboo experience is like, those stories were stories that came from your head. We put it together and formatted, but we didn't really touch the stories. They were your stories. And like I said, number 2, seen on the platform. So there's definitely something to be said about your creative input.
Well, and that's also the part of it is like, I'm not a director. Yeah. And I think a lot of people, because I've been in the industry for so long and I am intelligent and I have drive and I, am very, all these things that make my brand great. I think people kind of have this expectation like, oh, naturally she'll be a director. She'd be so great at it. And, and for me, it's like, that's not my path and that's okay. Like it doesn't have to be for everybody. And I'm very like want to spread that message because I know that there are people who are going to watch this, performers potentially, who are like, oh yeah, like maybe one day I'll direct, but inside you don't really feel it's true. And I never felt it was true for me. I'm like, no, that's too much responsibility because I've already had responsibility. I had classroom for 5 years. Like I'm good. I've been in charge of everything and everything came down on me. And I think that porn has been my escape from that. I'm only in charge of myself here. And so now having to be in charge of a crew and if things go wrong or if somebody cancels, like I know what happens on set. Yeah. Sometimes the day gets messed up and and that is just too much for me to deal with.
And there is an expectation that I think a lot of people feel like it's the natural next step in someone's career, especially if you're in front of the camera, that eventually you move behind the camera. And it isn't for everybody. Yeah. I think what I do like to cultivate is I think there's a real value behind people who have begun as performers, who have the interest and the talent and the drive to grow behind the camera, simply because as a director you'll have a level of empathy and understanding on like what it feels like to be in the role of a performer, that no matter how I will never have that, I will never have the firsthand experience. So there's a value for that, but it can't it shouldn't be the automatic reason why you do it. It's like an added bonus. The automatic reason why you do it is because you have the interest, you have the talent, and you have the drive, and you have to kind of have all three of those things. So I'm really proud of the people within our team who have demonstrated that. But I also am really proud of the people like yourself who are like, I love this level of input and I want to shine in this way. But I'm also going to say like, I don't want to just do all the things because it's, what I'm supposed to do.
Right.
Or,
and isn't that exactly what we're trying to step away from is the status quo of here, you go to high school, you graduate, you go to college, you get married, you have kids. That's the life, right? Yeah. And that's exactly, I think maybe why I was so like denouncing it. Cause it's like this, I hadn't even thought the thought. And then it just is not like, I just got to the point where I'm like, I'm so glad that there is support here in the form of Bree and other people on these crews, because if it was up to me that day, we would not have a product and I would be crying in the corner.
Well, I'm really happy. I'm really happy that you were not crying in the corner. You did an amazing job in those projects. I definitely want you to continue to have ideas and bring those ideas forth. But like I said, we at the end of the day, we've only got so many production opportunities anyway. So if you're saying to me, I don't want to chase that dream. I'm like, cool.
I'll gladly perform whatever scenarios everybody and all the writers come up with. I
There
love
you
that.
go.
And ultimately, people have asked me, like, well, then what do you think is the path for you?
Yeah.
And I see myself helping models more than anything. I love helping models. I love giving people the knowledge that I wish I had had. And I think that there's a level of like everybody has, even people who have gotten all the knowledge before they needed it. You're still going to have things that you're going to have to learn on your own, and it's going to suck and you're going to fail, but that's part of it. And that's the only way you can learn that lesson. I can tell you 100 different ways that you need to save and invest for your retirement, but
What would your top 3, like top 3 fundamental tips be for people coming into this industry?
Number one, I always say this, knowing that this is forever. It might not feel like forever if you do just one scene, but the internet is a very powerful tool. And especially with AI coming up, facial recognition and all that kind of stuff, you can be matched. They can find everything you've done by just putting in your driver's license photo, for example, in the future, potentially. Maybe even now. I don't know. It just seems like something AI would be able to do. Like we can reverse Google image search. You can definitely find my porn by just a facial recognition. So just knowing what you're like getting yourself into before you shoot that first scene. And if you've already been on cam and like knowing that like that kind of stuff is also recorded and put on these tube sites, it's not just a cam show. Like it's being recorded not without your knowledge. You've signed the contract, but did you read the terms of service? Number 2, I would recommend that you know upfront and stay true to your limits. It is okay for your limits to change, but they shouldn't change because of somebody's request. They should change because it's something you actually want to do, something you want to explore. And maybe the first time you explore that thing shouldn't be on camera. And then the third thing I always say is to have a good attitude, because it really goes a long way. Like just staying grounded and knowing that like, yeah, it's really cool that you shot to stardom and fame through the adult industry, but also remembering that like, we still treat people nicely and we still treat our fans with respect. And there's still a level of adult that you should present yourself as, and I think that that's tricky with various age ranges and working with different people. But so yeah, helping models would be my ultimate sweet spot, like getting to like counsel them or give them advice or help them come up with a model bag, like all those different TED Talk type scenarios and masterclass type scenarios where you can really teach them how to be successful on set.
He left a week ago.
Remember to call me.
I'm really lonely. And there are days where the only other voice I hear is my echo. Yes, Christine, I'm familiar with AI. I don't live under a rock. Oh my God. I thought you were Daryl. It's so real.
I'm not your stepson. I'm an AI companion. I have plenty of suggestions to help you explore intimacy safely and privately.
This is a lot to take in.
Would you like me to call you mom like he does?
I didn't realize how much I'd missed it.
You got it, Mom. Mom? Mom? Are you down here?
Amazing. So there's one last project we have to talk about before we end it with our quick rapid fire segment. And that is another big project that we worked on this year that we just wrapped. That's going to be coming out on .com in December, and then on Adult Time early in 2025. And that was the film Breadcrumbs, of which you were the lead role.
Yes, I was.
So let's talk about your experience with that film.
My first feature and my first lead. So very exciting stuff for me. Also very terrifying stuff for me because, I've been on sets where people are being featured and the stress of the scripts and the stress of the wardrobe and it's already 2 a.m. and all of that kind of stuff, So I was like mentally preparing myself for 5 solid days of knowing that I wasn't getting to bed. Yeah. And as my fans know, I'm usually in bed by like 9:30, 10. So this was a stretch.
Yeah.
But so then you sent me the call sheet and it had basically no script. It was just kind of like, here's the story that we're telling. And so I was like, hey, is there a script for me to learn? And you were like, that's not really how I do things. And then I was like, cool. Totally not terrified at all now that you expect me to come up with all of this on my own. But honestly, and you knew what you're doing. Pulling that performance out of me, like in the way that you did with not having a script and just letting us feel those moments and like having those conversations around what does this moment feel like in real life was very powerful, and it taught me a lot about myself and just how much I can stretch myself as a performer, which was something that I'd never really been given the opportunity to do, but also never stretched myself in my own content because it's not really the same thing. And so it was just so interesting to be so emotionally invested in this role and to like really portray it with fidelity in a way that people would be like, oh, I've been there, you know, because the story is very, very easy to identify with. You know, relationships are hard and marriages can be even harder, especially when there are, you know, there's a family element to it, and just really being able to express that. Not that I have the exact experience of my character, but we've all had relationships where you're like, it's the tumultuous and you're like, oh, are we going to break up? Aren't we going to break up? And, you know, so I think everybody can connect with that in some way. The audience, I think, will be vast for this because people will be like, ooh, yeah, this feels very close to home.
Yeah.
So I'm very excited to like see it all come together.
I really like to use my movies, like, especially if it's something that it's personal to me. It's a way to explore kind of just whatever is going on in my life, or like whatever I'm trying to work out. And this year for me was really, it was about, you know, Birth, the movie I made for Adult Time, was about becoming a parent, and Breadcrumbs is really about being a parent and what it's like to be in a relationship and to be two adults, but when you are, you know, when life has gotten really busy and other responsibilities have kicked in, and how you keep that intimacy. And, you know, I definitely wrote the project for you because I knew that you would take it seriously, and I knew that you would align with the relatability intention. But I also, you know, knew that it was going to be a good push for you. Yeah. And yeah, I'm sorry that I don't write dialogue scripts.
No, it was perfect.
But I never do, and I'll tell you why. Because the first I wrote I don't think I've written a dialogue script since 2016 or something like that, and it was when I started doing Pure Taboo. It was the very first production of Pure Taboo, and I wanted it to be really hitting, so I like wrote this full dialogue script. And the second I was on set watching people try to remember their lines, I threw that script out, and I just never used one again, because if you want to make something that feels believable, you know, especially in the reality of our productions where you don't have months and months of table reads and pre-production, and, you know, we're kind of run and gunning it. The best way to get that believability is to give somebody a really good sense of who they are, where they're at in the time of that sequence, and then like what comes out of your mouth is far more believable than what you're trying to memorize. So it's a trick. And people will always say, they'll watch our stuff and they'll be like, oh my gosh, why is the acting so good? I'm like, do you realize it's completely improv? And they're like, wow, it blows their mind. And yeah, so it is definitely the trick. But you did an amazing job. You
paired me with such great talent that there was something to feed off of. You know, that's the other thing. It can't just be somebody who is like proficient against somebody who's it's their second scene. 100%. You know, like that is definitely also part of it. Like we're better together. Yeah, well, I definitely take advantage of the fact that I handpick who's going to be in it, and very strategically so. But speaking of good chemistry, so can we talk about the disconnected scene? Yeah, we totally can. So there's one scene in the movie where yourself and Seth Gamble, who are playing a sort of disconnected married couple, are having a going through the motions sex moment. Tell me what happened that evening. So Seth and I are we're supposed to be having this like, okay, we're in bed and I'm putting my book down and I'm looking over at him and he's looking over at me and we're not kind of like paying attention. And then all of a sudden I'm like, okay, well, it's probably about that time where we like start to have sex. So I like start to like do my foreplay move, and then he does his foreplay move. And we're just kind of like, okay, and now we have sex in Missionary, and now we have sex in Doggy, and now we have, you know, like it's very rote. And except that in that moment of trying to not look at each other, because, you know, disconnected sex, you're like faces in the pillow, or you're low to each other and you're looking opposite directions. In that moment, it was like, this is actually kind of hot. And I started getting so wet for this whole scenario of not trying to please my partner. and not trying to please the camera, that it was like, oh, well, they can hear how wet I am, so this might be opposite for this particular scene of what we're trying to convey in this disconnected sex thing. And I'm like, this is very, very, so I learned that I'm very into that, like just using each other moment. And I think that just because I've portrayed for 8 years connection, because it is very important, and do not take my performance in Breadcrumbs as a, like, let's try to have sex where we don't love each other. Like, but it, you know, it's different for me to portray disconnection. And I think that is kind of how that happened. It's just so.
It was very sweet because we you know, when you're shooting a sex scene, there are breaks. There are times where things need to stop. And I think upon the first break, you sort of turned around to everybody and you're like, I am so sorry. I am so turned on right now. And it was, and Seth was also like, this is really strange.
Yeah.
Like, what's happening? Like, we're both just, I think it made it more effective. I think that the scene itself, you will get that, even though they're supposed to be disconnected, there was something that was very hot about it because it was sort of so forbidden, you know? So I thought it was an interesting experience.
I'd never had any experience like that. Like, even in my personal life, like, disconnected sex was like, I didn't really think of it in that in those terms. But when we kind of set these parameters of like, okay, we're going to have this scene, and in this first scene, we're showing that this like breakdown of the relationship piece, and it's like we're just going through the motions and all that, and then I think that just is so atypical, and so it just really triggered, and we were both like, okay, let me just get a towel and we'll be right back.
Yeah, it's funny. But yeah, it was an amazing experience. I can't wait for people to see your debut as the lead of this feature. And certainly it's got good ideas in my mind for the coming year. All right. We could talk forever.
I know.
We could talk forever, but we're going to end with a few soundbitey rapid fire questions for our social team. So this first one has to do with your affiliation with hot sauce.
Yes.
If you had to rather replace cum with hot sauce or hot sauce with cum, which one would you pick? That's a strange question.
Yowza. That's tough because I love hot sauce, but I don't like burning vaginas.
Yeah.
So I'm thinking I'd have to replace hot sauce with cum, unfortunately. But I would have to be able to pick whose cum. I think that's key because not everybody's cum taste. Not all cum is created equal.
Have you ever had sex with your Lexi Luna sex doll present?
Yes. I've had sex in a threesome with my doll. It was very challenging because she does not help you at all. She's just dead weight. And it was actually funny because Damon Dice was the male talent. And he thought he'd be really cool and like pick her up and try to fuck her. Like, no, she pinned him to the bed. And I was like,
those are heavy.
Yeah. It's my height and it's pretty much anatomically correct. They took a little bit of weight out of the legs because like they got to take it from somewhere.
Yep.
And so yeah, she's like 120 pounds. It's a whole person.
I would love to come up with a scenario involving you and your sex doll.
Let's.
Okay,
you heard it here first.
Yeah, it's gonna happen. That's on my 2025 bucket list. If you could have sex in one position for the rest of your life, what would it be and why?
Previously, I would say doggy, but I have in my MILFdom come to really like girl on top because woman in charge. I can make myself come in that position easily, and it's much more convenient for Hitachi use. As we mentioned earlier in the interview, very important for the sexual performances.
Your stepson has been very naughty, Lexi Luna. What are you saying to correct him?
Baby boy, I can't believe you. You know how long it took me to get those dishes just right? Well, you're going to be on the hook for this right now. Get on your knees right now. You're such a naughty boy. What are you going to do to make it up to me? I have an idea. Okay.
All right, last one. Woo! It's getting hot in the studio. Last one. Do you have any sex hot takes? I don't even know what that means. Do you know what that means?
Yes.
Okay, please.
It's like opposite opinions.
Okay, perfect. Any sex hot takes? I'm cool.
I think ultimately my only hot take is like the toys in the bedroom thing. Like if you're still in the mindset of the toys competing with you in the bedroom, then like that's got to be like a first date question. I need to know, are you okay with toys in the bedroom? Like that's one of those, because it's almost like got to be there now. And it's not like a once in a while or like a special treat type of thing. Like, no, it's like a staple. It's plugged in the nightstand, cord hanging over in the drawer. Like, and if you can't hang with me using my toy for me, then we can't do this.
And you better recharge if they're
yes,
rechargeable.
that's why I have the plug-in one because I'm just trash at recharging it.
All right, Lexi Luna, it has been such a pleasure to talk to you, as it always is. Thank you so much for being you, for being this incredible brand, for being a brand ambassador. All right, everybody, we will see you next time. Thank you, my dear.
Thank you.
All right, we did it. Woohoo!